The hospital receptionist looked at the flowers in my hand and gave me a confused smile. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no patient named Diane Carter in this hospital." I thought she had made a mistake. 3 days earlier, my wife Rachel had watched me transfer $40,000 from our savings account to pay for her mother's emergency heart surgery. Now, the hospital was telling me her mother had never been admitted. Rachel and I had been married for 9 years. We weren't rich, but we were careful with money. That $40,000 had taken us almost 6 years to save. It was supposed to help us pay off our mortgage early. But when Rachel called me at work crying, none of that mattered. She said her mother had collapsed during a routine appointment. Doctors had found a serious blockage, and the surgery couldn't wait. According to Rachel, there was a problem with her mother's insurance, and the hospital required a large payment before proceeding. That evening, Rachel showed me a medical estimate on her phone. It had her mother's name, the hospital's logo, and a total of $39,850. "I don't know who else to ask," she whispered. "If something happens to her because we hesitated, I'll never forgive myself." I didn't hesitate. Rachel gave me the payment instructions, and I transferred the money the next morning. For the next 3 days, she barely came home. She said she was sleeping in a chair outside the intensive care unit. Whenever I offered to visit, she stopped me. "Mom doesn't want you seeing her like this." On the 4th morning, I decided to surprise them. I left work early, bought Diane's favorite flowers, and drove to St. Catherine's Hospital. That was when the receptionist told me Diane wasn't there. She checked the spelling twice. Then she searched the hospital's other locations. Nothing. I walked outside and called my mother-in-law. Diane answered on the 3rd ring. She sounded perfectly healthy. "Owen, is everything okay?" For several seconds, I couldn't speak. "Diane, where are you?" "At home." "What?" I looked down at the flowers. "Rachel told me you had emergency heart surgery." The silence on the other end changed everything. Finally, Diane said, "Owen, I haven't been inside a hospital in over a year." She told me Rachel had recently asked for a photograph of her insurance card. Rachel claimed she needed it to update some family records. I thanked Diane and ended the call. Then I checked the transfer receipt more carefully. The money hadn't gone to St. Catherine's Hospital. It had gone to a company called Harbor Point Escrow. I had been too distracted by Rachel's tears to notice. Instead of calling her, I went home and opened the tablet we shared for household expenses. Rachel's email was still connected. I searched for Harbor Point. The first result was a purchase agreement for a newly built apartment across town. The $40,000 was the deposit. But Rachel's name wasn't the only name on the agreement. The second buyer was Jason Cole, a manager from her office. She had mentioned him before, usually when complaining about long meetings or late projects. There were dozens of emails between them. Most were about appliances, furniture, and moving dates. But one message from Rachel made my hands go cold. "Once Owen sends the money, we'll finally have enough. He'll believe anything if I say Mom is sick." Jason replied with a laughing emoji. I wanted to call Rachel immediately. I wanted to hear her try to explain it. Instead, I called an attorney. He told me not to confront her yet. I saved copies of every email, the false medical estimate, the transfer receipt, and the messages from Diane. My attorney contacted the escrow company and warned them that the deposit involved disputed marital funds and possible fraud. The apartment closing was temporarily stopped. That evening, Rachel arrived home shortly after midnight. She looked exhausted, but now I could see that the exhaustion was an act. "How's your mom?" I asked. Rachel sighed. "Not good. The doctors are worried about another blockage." "What room is she in?" Rachel paused. "Why? I thought I'd send her flowers." "I already told you. She doesn't want visitors." Then I placed the flowers on the kitchen counter. The same flowers I had carried into the hospital. Rachel stared at them. "I went to St. Catherine's today," I said. "They've never hurted her mother." The color disappeared from her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then the excuses started. She said the apartment was an investment. She said Jason was only helping her qualify for financing. She said she planned to surprise me after it increased in value. I placed the printed email between us. "He'll believe anything if I say Mom is sick." Rachel stopped talking. I told her my attorney had already contacted the escrow company. The closing was frozen Our remaining savings were protected, and I had moved my salary into a new account. "You went to a lawyer before speaking to me?" she asked. It was almost impressive that she could still sound offended. "You invented your mother's surgery before speaking to me." Rachel started crying. This time, I didn't believe the tears. The next morning, she left to stay with Jason. That arrangement lasted less than a week. According to the messages later provided during the divorce, Jason believed Rachel was already separated and that the deposit came from money she had inherited. When he learned the truth, he removed himself from the purchase agreement and ended their relationship. Diane gave my attorney a written statement confirming she had never been sick. She also apologized to me, although none of it had been her fault. Because the apartment sale hadn't closed, most of the $40,000 was eventually returned. Some of it disappeared into legal and administrative fees, but I recovered far more than Rachel expected. The divorce took 6 months. Rachel lost the apartment, Jason, and the marriage she had been using to finance her escape. I never screamed at her. I never threatened her, and I never posted her messages online. I simply kept the evidence and stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own decisions. For weeks, I thought the worst part was the money. It wasn't. The worst part was realizing that Rachel knew exactly which lie would make me stop asking questions. She didn't just use our savings. She used my concern for her mother against me. But that was also her biggest mistake. Because the moment the hospital told me Diane had never been admitted, I finally stopped listening to Rachel's words and started checking the facts.